Imagine having the power to erase half of all life in the universe with a single snap. You could literally change the fate of trillions of beings in an instant. Now imagine using that power not to destroy them, but to create unlimited food, unlimited water, unlimited resources, and enough energy for everyone to live comfortably. Sounds like the obvious solution, right? So, here's the question that has confused Marvel fans for years. If Thanos had the Infinity Stones and could do almost anything, why didn't he simply create more food instead of killing half the universe? If his goal was really to stop overpopulation and prevent civilizations from starving, then why choose the most brutal solution imaginable? To understand Thanos, we first have to understand that he didn't believe the problem was simply a shortage of food. Thanos believed the problem was the number of living beings consuming resources. In his mind, every planet had a limited amount of food, water, energy, land, and other resources. As populations increased, demand would eventually become greater than supply. Thanos believed that when this happened, civilizations would collapse. People would fight over resources, governments would fall, wars would begin, and eventually entire worlds would destroy themselves. This belief is what shaped Thanos into the villain we see in the MCU. But here's where his logic starts to fall apart. Because if Thanos really had the Infinity Stones, he could potentially manipulate reality itself. He could create resources, change the laws of physics, increase the amount of usable energy, or even make food appear whenever someone needed it. So why didn't he do that? Why wasn't his solution something like, "I'll make every planet abundant so nobody has to suffer"? The answer is actually connected to Thanos' personality. Thanos didn't simply want to solve a resource problem. He believed the universe had become weak because civilizations had forgotten the importance of sacrifice and survival. To Thanos, suffering wasn't just a problem, it was part of his solution. He believed that when resources became limited, life became competitive, and only the strongest and most capable civilizations would survive. In his twisted philosophy, randomly eliminating half of all life would restore balance and give the remaining population enough resources to survive. That's why the snap wasn't really about food. Food was only one part of the equation. Thanos believed that reducing the population would reduce pressure on everything. Fewer people would mean less food consumption, less energy consumption, less competition for land, and fewer demands on the environment. From his perspective, he wasn't destroying the universe. He was saving it by forcing it to become smaller. But there's a massive problem with this plan. The universe doesn't stay at half population forever. People reproduce, new civilizations grow, populations recover. Eventually, the same resource problem Thanos was supposedly trying to solve could happen again. In other words, the snap doesn't permanently fix overpopulation. It only resets the population. And that's where Thanos' plan becomes even more questionable. If he truly wanted a permanent solution, he could have changed the fundamental conditions of life. He could have increased resources, improved technology, transformed barren planets into habitable worlds, or created new sources of energy. He could have used the Infinity Stones to give civilizations the ability to produce enough resources for everyone. But Thanos didn't think like a scientist searching for the most efficient solution. He thought like someone who had already decided what the solution had to be. He believed sacrifice was necessary, and once he became convinced of that idea, he interpreted everything through it. And there's another important clue hidden in Thanos' own history. When he visited planets suffering from scarcity, he didn't just see hungry people. He saw civilizations approaching collapse. He believed that if population continued growing, the problem would eventually become impossible to control. He even claimed that his homeworld, Titan, had faced a similar crisis. According to Thanos, Titan ignored his warnings, and the civilization eventually suffered catastrophic consequences. That experience appears to have convinced him that his solution was correct. Instead of thinking, maybe we need better technology, Thanos thought, I was right about the problem, and everyone else was wrong about the solution. And that's actually what makes Thanos more interesting than a villain who simply wants to destroy everything. He genuinely believed he was the hero of his own story. Think about it. Thanos didn't want to rule over the survivors. He didn't want everyone worshipping him. After the snap, he didn't build an empire. He went to a quiet planet and lived a simple life. In his mind, the job was finished. He had sacrificed himself emotionally to save the universe, and now he could finally rest. But there's an even bigger question. If Thanos could create more food, why didn't he simply double the resources of every planet? The problem is that the Infinity Stones aren't necessarily presented as an unlimited wish machine, where every imaginable change has no consequences. The MCU shows that using the stones, especially together, requires enormous power and can have devastating effects on the person wielding them. Thanos himself was severely injured after the snap. So while the stones could perform extraordinary feats, Marvel never clearly establishes that every possible solution would be equally simple or sustainable. And there's another possibility that makes the situation even darker. Maybe Thanos didn't choose the snap because it was the only solution. Maybe he chose it because it was the solution he wanted. That's a huge difference. If Thanos simply wanted to save lives, there were countless alternatives. He could have created resources. He could have expanded habitable space. He could have increased energy production. He could have accelerated technological development across civilizations. He could have created new worlds. He could have made food production dramatically more efficient. With the Infinity Stones, there were potentially countless possibilities. But all of those solutions would require Thanos to trust the civilizations of the universe, and Thanos didn't trust them. He believed intelligent life would always consume more, reproduce more, and eventually destroy itself again. So rather than changing the system, he changed the number of people inside the system. And that tells us something important about Thanos. His real enemy wasn't hunger. It wasn't food. It wasn't even overpopulation. His real enemy was what he believed living beings would inevitably do when given unlimited opportunity. He believed that life would always consume until there was nothing left. And once you understand that, the snap makes much more sense from his perspective. Of course, that doesn't mean Thanos was right. In fact, the MCU itself gives us evidence that his solution was deeply flawed. After the blip, the universe didn't suddenly become a perfect place. Billions of people were grieving, families were separated, governments collapsed, infrastructure was disrupted, economies were damaged, and when the population returned, the universe still had to deal with the original problems. Thanos didn't create balance. He created trauma on a universal scale. And here's the most interesting part. Thanos actually had the power to prove his philosophy wrong. He could have created abundance and watched what civilizations did with it. He could have given them unlimited resources and seen whether they still destroyed themselves. But he never gave them that chance. Instead, he decided that he already knew the answer. That's why the snap isn't just a solution to overpopulation. It's a reflection of Thanos himself. He believed that life needed to suffer in order to survive, that sacrifice was unavoidable, and that someone had to make the impossible decision for everyone else. And perhaps that's the biggest flaw in his entire plan. Thanos believed he was saving the universe by taking away half of its people. But if he truly had the power to create abundance and chose death instead, then maybe the universe didn't need saving from overpopulation. Maybe it needed saving from Thanos' belief that he was the only one capable of deciding who deserved to survive. And that leaves us with one final question. If Thanos really wanted balance, why did he stop at half? Why not reduce the population by 10%? Why not 20%? Why not create enough resources for everyone? Why exactly 50%? Because the answer may reveal something even more disturbing about Thanos. Maybe the snap was never about finding the perfect mathematical solution. Maybe it was about making the universe suffer enough to prove that he was right all along.